Hey there, and welcome to That News You Care About, a weekly video game news show from the folks over at That Nerdy Site. Today is Tuesday, December 22nd, 2020, and I'm one of your hosts, Logan Wilkinson. Joining me this week is my Phoenix son, Trevor Starkey.
I am so tempted to just leave like the 10 seconds of you like preparing before we started going.
Again, as a peek behind the curtain in case Trevor doesn't, had every week it's like a mental exercise of like, are we recording on a Monday or Tuesday? Which day to get right here? And as I was doing that this week, I could just like sense him in the background already starting to like smirk, and I was like, he's gonna just like break me, and had to like compose myself to get it right.
Doesn't help that I'm wearing my stupid god awful Mario Christmas sweater from GameStop.
If you are not watching the video version of this week's episode with Trevor wearing a Mario Christmas sweater, me having shaved a Christmas mustache for the holiday season here, you're really missing it out here. It is very much worth the free YouTube subscription. So I recommend you go there. Happy 2 days before Christmas here, Trevor, when this goes live. Yep. 'Tis the season. How are you doing?
Just trying to rush through last chance game of the year games at this point.
Yep.
I finished Cyberpunk, which was like the last really big one, I guess technically. I'm playing through Immortals: Fenyx Rising, which is another big open world one. But I also have like a good enough gist of what that game is to know probably where it's going to fall on my list. And then it's going to just be like, are there any last minute small games that are going to squeak in under the radar here in the last week of 2020?
Yeah, it's one for me. We were talking about before we started recording. We had just finished, and we're talking about like Raji and Ancient Epic, which is a smaller game, and then talking about Cyberpunk for Trevor. Obviously, he just finished, and then me kind of playing my way through Black Ops Cold War. Super Meat Boy comes out the day you're listening to this, and for me to play through that, obviously, we're each kind of in that mode of trying to run through as many things as we can before Game of the Year conversations start for That Nerdy and kind of dominate the month of January.
The big like unknown question mark for me right now is a couple days ago I was like, I'm gonna go ahead and pull the trigger on trying to get an Oculus Quest 2. And I went to Best Buy, and they were sold out. And I was like, crap, okay, that's not going to happen. And then, like, yesterday, they did, like, a push notification on my phone of, like, hey, 1 day sale or whatever. Or, like, quick sale, flash sale, blah, blah, blah. And I logged in, and it still had the Oculus Quest 2 in the cart for me from the other day when I tried to order and couldn't. But this time, it let the order go through. And it was like, it's not going to get there by Christmas, but it'll get there, like, a day or two after. And I was like, that's good enough for me. So I've got that on the way, and I'm gonna try to squeeze in Half-Life Alyx as like a last ditch potential Game of the Year contender.
GameSpot's Game of the Year, I believe it was GameSpot.
Maybe, I don't know.
I think GameSpot gave it. Yeah, it's Game of the Year or something. Again, it's been a very interesting season for Game of the Year winners so far, which I've kind of appreciated and enjoyed. Again, IGN gave Hades their Game of the Year. We were talking about that before we started recording as well. Unfortunately, we are not talking about fun, festivities, and video games and Christmas time gaming. We are talking about that old news you care about horse, Cyberpunk 2077. Trevor, it has been quite the launch of this video game. And in classic video game podcast fashion, I think the day after last week's episode went live, or maybe the day after that, news broke of just, it felt like a series of news articles and news stories kept breaking about Cyberpunk.
Yeah, it has been since launch. And yeah, where we left off on the saga was they had put out their like, we're sorry it's broken. Please reach out to retailers or your digital storefronts for refunds. And PlayStation in particular did not respond kindly to that. So
they did not like it.
A day or two after our last episode, I think, they basically came out and said, here's our new specific 2077 refund policy, but also the game is delisted from our store.
Yep.
Which is pretty much unheard of. It's definitely unheard of for a game of the size and scope of
that's caliber.
Cyberpunk. Yeah.
It was incredible. And it's funny too, where the person that nerdy staff member that I got this news from was the only non-video game correspondent at the site, and Jazz Foster's sending me a text just being like, "Yo, did you see this?" And learning about it that way. It's been, I mean, almost a week at this point. I still kind of can't believe it. It is such a wild. I mean, everything about. I mean, again, we raved about it last week.
Yeah,
everything about its launch and rollout has just been so poorly done. But like to not pretty much give them any sort of like heads of it felt like hey, we're gonna just like put this release out. Feels like such a bizarre decision.
Yeah, so it was Thursday night, so the day after last week's episode went live. And you had messaged me. Did you see the PlayStation Cyberpunk news? And you hit me up maybe like 15 minutes after like PlayStation made the post or something like that, or I don't know, something like that. And I had been recording that D Plus show with was it Cam last week? No, Frank.
Yeah, I think so.
And so we had just finished like recording that episode when I saw you, and so like I saw your message of like, did you see the news? And before responding, I went and just found the news, and I was like, wow, that is a thing that has happened. Yeah, that's impressive.
It is impressive to say the least. It is a truly like an unprecedented thing in the video game industry for a game of this caliber to be straight up delisted from either Microsoft, Sony, or Nintendo's stores.
Yeah, there were a few cases. As soon as we saw it, I was like, I remember hearing news stories of other games that had come out and then were like pulled from storefronts because of quality issues or something like that. And I found, fortunately, Mike Futter at Futterish on Twitter is a very lauded kind of games analyst thing. He put in a tweet a few of the big examples he had identified. One of which was Overkill's The Walking Dead. One of the big ones from earlier this year was Artifact, which I believe was like Amazon released it and then unreleased it after, like based on just the feedback. Or no, Artifact was that was the Steam one. Crucible is the one I'm thinking of, I think. Now I don't. Now some of these are getting mixed up. And then lastly, the Culling 2. So yeah, like 4 games there. But as he pointed out, these are all the games I can think of that were unreleased due to quality based on actions of the dev or the publisher. The fact that Sony pulled the plug on Cyberpunk is as a quote from him, as far as I can recall, unprecedented.
Yeah. I mean, because again, even like the other games that I remember being pulled from, like, I mean, in their case, like physical stores back in the day, were because of like the content of the game itself, like whether it was like, again, usually violence in terms of like the Mortal Kombat outrage in the 90s, or I think of like the Hot Coffee,
Hot
crisis
coffee.
in like San Andreas, but like the game itself worked fine. It wasn't the game was being so broken or being so buggy or whatever it was, or running
and
vastly different on the consoles.
And there are way worse games that are still available for sale.
Yeah,
and way
absolutely.
buggier games. And yeah, like some of the conversation around this was this being a weaker or a worse launch than something like Anthem or Fallout 76. Fallout 76, I think, is probably the closest analog there. But Bethesda didn't come out and say like, hey, go ahead and like ask for refunds en masse. And that's the that's the switch here, is that like PlayStation most likely, like, if not got blindsided by that, was certainly not prepared for the response they maybe got, and especially given Sony's existing refund policy through the PlayStation Network. They were not ready to. They were certainly not ready to handle that. So I think that was kind of why they ultimately, like, the fact that they had to make a separate policy for this. They can't then continue selling the game if they know that they're leaving it open for those kinds of refunds, especially if it is like, okay, we're gonna go ahead and expand the refund to, like, if you bought it within 2 weeks or something like that, which I think is what that's definitely what Steam does. Maybe that's what Xbox does as well. Like, they're not going to keep selling that game, let people play it, maybe with bugs or without, and then just return it saying it was, a buggy, broken mess. Basically get a free rental of the game. So yeah, I mean,
It's
for the size and scale of what was going on, it makes sense that
yeah.
they pulled it from the stores as well.
I mean, not even that. Like, I mean, definitely there are other buggy, broken games like Cyberpunk. I think it's a two-pronged issue of Cyberpunk being just being such a dominant, high-profile video game, right? It is just like it's gonna have way more eyes on it than like Black Tiger, or whatever it was, or like these kind of things that are also just like broken, or like the Hannah Montana video games.
Yeah, the fact that I was seeing NPR stories about like all of the Cyberpunk issues.
Yeah,
was like,
exactly.
it broke through the mainstream.
One of my friends showed me a USA Today story, which if even more mainstream than NPR. And then the other thing is just the fact that like I just think if the team behind Cyberpunk had just handled this better, it had been more open and honest in their communications, not even with the press, which it should have been, not even with consumers, which it should have been, but with like PlayStation and Microsoft themselves about like what they were going to do. Like it felt like you kind of said, like if PlayStation wasn't straight up blindsided by the news, it felt like they were given like 10 minutes notice, and then they were like sent it out. And it's like we talked last week about how legal clearly had gone over this when they put out, but apparently legal wasn't told about the fact they were going to like just like not tell these other giant entities to be involved in the decision as well. Because you have to imagine if like the legal team would have been like, why would you have done it like this? Like, this is such a poor way to have executed this strategy and plan and not give any sort of forward notice, because of course they're going to be upset. Like, there's like, it's just such a strange decision in a series of strange decisions. And it, like you kind of mentioned already, in the wake of this and just everything involved in Cyberpunk, the kind of conversation around like, is this the worst like video game, like AAA video game launch in recent memory, right? And like Fallout 76 came up and Anthem came up. Anthem I don't think really belongs in the conversation. Anthem I don't think was like a disaster. I just think it was like like people just weren't that into it, basically.
Yeah, Anthem
like,
was very much like and this is because Marvel's Avengers is another one that has come up, in the conversation recently, and Greg Miller over at Kind of Funny pointed out like Anthem and Avengers, like both those games worked. Those games, maybe the end game is a little bit more sparse than you want them to be, but those games work. Yeah. They play, and you can get a story, you can get the enjoyment out of those games. The fact that the Cyberpunk crashes so frequently, the fact that it was never really shown working on the PS4, Xbox One generation of consoles pre-launch, like the fact that was like deliberately hidden from people, that's where everything gets extra super shady. It's one of those things like it even got lost in the shuffle until somebody on a podcast mentioned it, but the idea that like so much of the conversation is like, it works fine on next-gen consoles. Like, the game isn't out on next-gen consoles. It's playing on the next-gen consoles through backwards compatibility, but it is not even a next-gen game yet. That's something that, like, because I was playing it on my Series X,
I didn't even think about it.
Didn't even, like, register to me the fact that, like, and when you go back to, like, when this game was originally supposed to launch, it was originally supposed to launch before we knew about the new console, or before we obviously the new consoles were there and we knew they were coming, but like before either of them got revealed. If you go back to like the April launch date that the game had earlier in the year, like we wouldn't have had a PS5, we wouldn't have had an Xbox One in the conversation yet. So clearly like the game needed way more time in the oven. But all that said, like, maybe it's just all much ado about nothing, because they came out and announced today that the game sold 13 million copies. So
I saw that, but I also saw like a Twitter, like again, like I can't remember his name, but like a video game like analyst,
Daniel Ahmad, probably,
maybe talk about how like it sold 13 million, but you have to imagine that number is gonna like drop off pretty far off a cliff after this.
Yeah. I mean,
it's just not on one of the just like not even on one of the storefronts at this point.
Yeah.
And so, kind of in terms of like its legs, I imagine it's significantly kind of going to take quite a dive compared to something like a GTA 5, or even like a Red Dead, like that kind of thing, or like I don't know how good The Witcher did, but I know that it would have had a longer tail span than I imagine this is probably going to have.
And I mean, it will. I mean, just like The Witcher, did. I think we talked about this last week. Even
we did
like when the Cyberpunk anime comes back up, and all of these bugs and issues are 2 years removed from and been patched and fixed and all that stuff. Like the game will pop back up when there is proper next gen versions of the game. Sales will pick back up again. I have no doubt of that. Sure. I don't think it will ever have Grand Theft Auto numbers just because of the always online or the online component of GTA Online that keeps that game kind of in the conversation.
Wild,
but I mean it's GTA numbers for a launch, which is certainly impressive.
It's just, I mean, and I don't want to belabor the point in it too much because I mean this is at this point Cyberpunk is becoming to news what you care about to what like Billy Mitchell and fucking Quantic Dream were to input, but it has been a wild experience to just watch this all happen in slow motion and have these time capsule episodes of News You Care, which is like diving further and further into it. I can't possibly imagine what sort of news we will have next. Next week's episode of Input is going to be like a special episode, so we won't have kind of any update if there is anything. Hopefully, they just stay calm for the holiday season.
You just called the show.
See.
You just called the show Input.
What for news to care about, man? I'm on holiday break right now, so news to care about. But maybe in 2 weeks, the whole world will have turned upside down, and we'll have a heap of Cyberpunk news.
I mean, certainly the biggest question I have is like, when and how does it come back to the PlayStation Store?
PSN.
Yeah, like when does that happen? And again, like going to my experience, because I talked about this on that Nerdy Site show, but I haven't talked about it on this show. Like I finished the game, finished Cyberpunk, and I've even since finishing, I've gone back in and I'm doing like more side missions and stuff, and I'll try and get like a different ending or something like that. But playing it on my Series X, I've had bugs in here and there. The game crashed 3 times on me overall, which, as I pointed out on Twitter and on that Nerdy Site show, is 4 times fewer than Ori and the Will of the Wisps crashed on me earlier in the year. Admittedly, Ori and the Will of the Wisps was running on a base level Xbox One compared to the Series X, but like it's still like I was very fortunate in that I had minimal crashing as a result of. I mean, like. Three game crashes seems like a drop in the bucket for a game these days, kind of thing. So it's like, which is a terrible state of gaming.
Yeah,
like the number of times Avengers has crashed on me or stuff like that. I'm sure I've had other issues in that vein, but yeah, it was like overall like the crashes were not, for me, the most disappointing things of Cyberpunk 2077. It was that a lot of the story and the philosophy that they kind of like approach in the game is just treated at like a surface level, and they could have gone deeper, and it could have been more interesting for me. But if you want to know more about that, you can listen to me and Cam talk about that at length for about an hour on this week's That Nerdy Site show.
I think for me, it's also one of. It is interesting the different ways that buggy games and game crashes can kind of define your version of that game's experience, right? Like, so for me, like the buggiest game I've probably ever had, or the worst kind of game crashes, certainly that I can remember in even remotely recent memory, was Firewatch. Like playing that like right as that came out, and that game having its own kind of
especially for
crashes and bugs and everything.
The size and scale of that game, it felt like this should be more polished than it is.
And so ever since then, Firewatch is a game that I should love that I don't. And I think there are issues I have with the story itself and the pace and the way that the game like does what it does. But also, in question me, part of it is just the fact that like the game just didn't work properly for me. Like it had a lot of slowdown for starters, a lot of popping, and then at a key moment in the game, years old. After you discover like the dead body in the cave, basically, and you come out of that and like you're kind of in like the end game at that point in time, like really kind of winding things down. I basically like you walk out of the cave and the game crashed, and I was like, all right, cool. Like I've had this. I think it happened like once before in the game. The game had been like kind of a technical mess, for lack of a word, in general before then. So like, all right, cool, fine, whatever. Restart it. Get back to that point again, and the game crashed, and then like it crashed a third time in that same part, and I was like, I might not be able to finish this game. I don't know if like this is some like one spot thing, and like ultimately, after like 3 or 4 crashes, I finally able to just like shimmy my way past that and like avoid whatever made the other ones crash there, and finish the game. But like just that, like, because you're going like with so much momentum from there, and then it just stops you so much, right? So like even I think I went back and played Firewatch again like the next year, and it had been like patched and was fixed, and it ran well enough and fine. But I even got to like that same moment, and like instinctively it was like, and now, and like when it didn't happen, it's like, oh, I'm just like so conditioned for it to like not work here, that like it was so like stuck with me, and so the way that there's like technical issues stay with you, and kind of inform your opinion of the game.
For me, the one that comes to mind just hearing you talk about that was After Party last year.
You've talked about this,
it was like a game I was so ready to love because I loved Oxenfree from Night School Studios.
Oxenfree's great.
And so like I was ready to hop into After Party, and just like the amount of chugging that game did, based on what was on screen, it was like there shouldn't be that much going on under the hood of this game. Why is it performing this badly? And it just got worse and worse and worse. To the point, and it crashed for me like at the end game and corrupted like that save file. So I ended up losing like 6 hours of progress in one of my playthroughs. Which was frustrating. And then still watching. Recently, Mike Towndrow over at 61 Indie. Shout out to them, friends of the site. He was doing like a platinum run for it, or he needed to do a run of the game to get like one of the last few trophies. I think he was doing it for like a Halloween kind of thing, maybe. But like even a year removed, it still chugged in a lot of the same points and same places and stuff. And so it was like it's unfortunate. And then that was one when like I was writing the review for that one. I was looking at like the press kit and the press assets that they had for that game, and you could tell like there were like just things that got cut out of the game based on like what they were showing versus like what the final product was, including like more demons and stuff like littered around the world. Like the press images they had showed a much more populated world. And the game itself was a lot more sparse and barren. And so maybe those characters were all still like in the game somewhere, and that's why it was chugging. They hadn't been like fully removed, but that was one of those where it was like it was disappointing because of the performance issues as much as anything else.
Yeah, I agree. But we've kind of veered past Cyberpunk a little bit here. So we'll wrap up that conversation. Trevor, any final thoughts on Cyberpunk for like the third or fourth week in a row here?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, at the end of the day, they sold 13 million copies.
At the end of the day,
in the first 10 days. So it's one of those cases of like, how much is those of us that follow the industry and stuff, how much of it is just an echo chamber talking upon itself versus the people that are out there picking up the game because Keanu Reeves sold it to them in a commercial. And maybe they're running into these issues, but if they don't follow everything, like if they don't follow Cyberpunk, they don't know the yellow background with black text meme of the apologies at this point. They just think, well, I got a broken game. Okay, I guess I don't know what to do with that.
I'll work my way through this. I have no other recourse. And that's kind of the unfortunate reality as well. Like you said, this whole thing has just been a mess. It has been kind of incredible to watch. And I mean, nothing would make. I mean, nobody should wish. And certainly we at That Nerdy don't wish for any game to be a failure and for any game to just like be broken out the gate. So nothing would make us happier than just have this game work properly and be patched and fixed where it can do that and you can get kind of the idle experience out of it. It is not what it is now. And they knew it and they just hit it And I think that will always be kind of the issue with it, for me at least, to a degree. But we will pivot from Cyberpunk for now. Trevor, do you have any shout-outs for the holiday season here?
I mean, not particularly. I guess go check out a lot of the sites are doing their Game of the Year, coverage, and so check out a lot of those pieces because, for me in particular, I love seeing, and IGN does this in particular, I know, but other sites probably do as well. I love seeing like the developers get excited about winning these things. So like if you go to the Hades one for IGN, there's a video of the Hades team all together on a Zoom call being told the news that they won. Like they introduce it of like we were just notified we won Best Action Game. And everyone's like, yay! And then like while everybody's saying yay, he Amir, I believe is his name, kind of continues on and Game of the Year. And so like there's like almost a delay of like people didn't catch that he said that, but then like everybody's like, oh, that's like even cooler, yay. So yeah, I love kind of getting those reactions. They did last year the same thing with like Control and the team kind of getting to celebrate Control being named Game of the Year. I know I saw pop up on my feed Laura Bailey and Neil Druckmann, saying thank you for their respective awards because I want to say Last of Us got like PlayStation exclusive of the year. So
I think I saw Last of Us got like best like story or narrative or something like that as well. And Laura Bailey continues to rack up awards for her performance in that. I will second that shout out as well. Just stay tuned again to all the kind of Game of the Year happenings all across the internet here. Again, That Nerdies will be coming to you pretty much for most of January. I'm very excited about it. We were kind of going through lots of games here in the kind of closing days of 2020 to bring you the best kind of content possible for that. Stay tuned for all of that. Otherwise, that is the show. Trevor's got to go record another podcast after this. It is going to be a good one. Because I am quite familiar with Muppets Christmas Carol, I believe. Shravi has never seen it, though. So that's the show. If you like what you heard, you can go support us by going to patreon.com/thatnerdysite. Like all of our wonderful patrons have, we are incredibly appreciative and thankful of your support, especially in the absurd year that has been 2020. What a hell of a year to launch our first full year as a site here. So thank you for all of your support. We appreciate it and are very much indebted to that. Again, you can go over to patreon.com/thatnerdysite. Look at all of the tiers, goals, shenanigans over there. It is very much worth the $1 for the Patreon exclusive episodes, starting with that, because we got some bangers out there. Stay tuned for those. We'll have to record that as well soon, Trevor.
Yep.
Otherwise, you can go support us by going to all the different podcast services around the globe and rating, reviewing, liking, subscribing, sharing with your friends, grandmas, relatives during the holiday season here. What better to break the ice during a family Zoom call than talking about news you care about and that D+ show? We all love it. So you can go do that as well. Otherwise, you can go find us over at our respective Twitter handles, social media handles. Trevor, you can go find at Trevor J. Starkey on the internet. Trevor, anything you want to shout out or plug?
So it went live today as we're recording this. My That Retro Gaming Show of Metroid on the NES Classic is out there.
Trevor had a spicy tweet with that.
So this is my first time really playing any Metroid game. Apart from like I vaguely have a brief memory of playing the 3DS remake of the Game Boy one, but like first one I put any real time into, I guess, would be this. Yeah. My tweet was basically like, let's look at the time Mario had been in Donkey Kong and Mario had been in Super Mario Brothers, and Mario Brothers, and then Samus had been in Metroid, and Samus has a way better jump in Metroid than Mario did in any of his 3 games up to that point. So, that's my hot take is Samus better jumper so far. Obviously, I know Mario's jump gets better in Mario 2 and Mario 3, but yeah.
So go check that out. It's all good. I think it was last week/weekend. I just binged a few different of the videos again. They're all very good. Trevor's doing great content out there on the Let's Play side of things. And there are lots of other Let's Play ideas happening around as well. So just stay tuned to the YouTube channel in general. There's a lot of good stuff out there, including this video that you're hopefully watching. You can go find me at LeftyLogie or LeftyLogie all across the internet. I will second, as I always do, Trevor shoutouts for anything Let's Play related because they're always great. And then I will also say, again, Cameron had a piece. Is it live now? That piece go live?
Yep. Yeah, his piece.
Cameron
on,
had this piece go live.
Soulsborne accessibility and difficulty. Yep.
And I know that talking to Jazz, who edited that piece, she had lots of talks back and forth about it. And so it is a good piece. Go check it out. As always, I again say stay tuned for a Game of the Year wrap-up stuff. It's going to be very good. And just all of our reviews, features, editorials, all the good content coming from That Nerdy team. There's a lot of good stuff out there. Otherwise, you can go find That Nerdy at That Nerdy site all across the internet. For myself, for Trevor, for all of the That Nerdy crew, we hope you have a very, very, very happy holidays and a new year, even though we'll come to you with another podcast before the end of the year. Have a happy holidays. Have a Merry Christmas. Merry everything. A happy Christmas, Harry. I went to a drive-in and saw Harry Potter last night. So I love the British people. And a little happy Christmas. But from all of us here, we hope you have your happy holidays and play your games and be good to each other.